Hi, I'm James with British Customs. Today we're going to be installing this cafe bar on this 2023 Triumph T120. So we get a lot of questions on why you can't install the cafe bar without changing the brake line. And the problem is that the angle of the cafe bar puts this banjo at such an angle that it's pulling way too hard on the brake hose. And that is a potential life-threatening problem that you don't want to have to deal with. You know, you could cause a leak right here the way it pulls so tight, and when it may look good when you first put it on, like, oh, that's going to be okay, but then you turn the bar and it might pull really tight, especially if you go full right. You know, it pulls extra hard on the hose here. So we make a kit with a full brake line that puts it at the right angle so you'd be nice and safe. So the first thing I want to do on this job is take the tank off, because we have to get the brake line out from underneath this tank. And .4 fluid is very corrosive and can really damage the tank. May not damage the chrome, but the paint, it will definitely eat up. So we don't want to get any .4 on there. So since we have to take it off to get the brake line out, might as well do that now, and then we don't have to worry about it. So that's where we're going to start. So we'll start by taking our seat off. The next thing I want to do is disconnect this battery. I know we don't show this in every video, but we probably should. You always want to disconnect your battery whenever you're working on the bike. Even though this job probably there's no real need for it, you just never know, and it's good practice to just always disconnect it. You only have to disconnect the ground side. You don't have to do the battery positive. And if you're gonna do both, always start with the ground side, taking it off, and then do the positive. So we're going to start by taking this bolt out. It's a 8mm on this side, 10mm nut on this side. So we'll hold the 10 with our wrench. What you want to do is lift up your tank here. Just get like a little block of wood or something to prop up in here, just to hold your tank up so you can get to all the stuff under here. All right, we're going to start by removing this fuel line right here, which you want to click this back so we can get to these two tabs. There's another one on the other side that you got to squeeze together and pry up. And you're going to want to stick some kind of rag in here just to catch the fuel. We may not catch all of it, but there's going to be some fuel in that line that's going to spill out. Try and catch some of it. I'm going to remove this hose just to make it easier for me to get my fingers in here. So just grab a pair of pliers. You want to pinch this down. You don't want to go crazy on it, just open it enough to be able to slide it. You don't want to destroy it because we want to reuse it later. And then we can pull that off. So now we can turn this a little bit this way. Push on those two there and push up at the same time, and it'll start to lift up. Now that it's lifting up, it's out of the groove there. If you're going to use a tool, just make sure you're not pushing against this piece here. You don't want to mess up the little lip that's under there, because that's what the thing locks onto. So next, we need to unplug these two here. It's going to be easier to get to them if we get this out of the way. So I'm just going to lift them up so that they're out of the way there, so I can pull this back now. Pull that back out of the way. And now I can get to these two plugs and pull them down where I can easily access them. We'll lift up on this tab here and pull that apart. I'm going to lift up on that tab there. Sometimes they're a little tight. Kind of want to pull and lift at the same time. There you go. Don't pull so hard that you're going to damage these wires if it's not coming apart. So now we just need to disconnect this hose. It's easier to disconnect it from the tank than it is from this piece here. So there's a little clip under here that's holding it. that it wants to go out that way. So you just bend it down just a little bit. Only bend it enough to get the hose out. Then on this side, it's coming this way. So again, only bend it as much as you have to get the hose out. And now we can pull it down. And that's off. So now we're ready to remove the tank. And before you do that, just make sure you have a place to put it. Lay down a towel on a table that's sturdy enough to hold it and is out of the way so you don't have any damage happen to it. Start by raising it, pull it back a little bit, and then lift up. So now that the tank's out of the way, we can go and drain all the fluid out of our brake system. We're going to do that using a vacuum operated evacuator. If you don't have one, I recommend you get one, borrow one, whatever you got to do, because with an ABS system, you have a lot of brake fluid going through here, and it'll take a long time to try and do it with a hand pump one, or to just try and bleed it like old school stuff. There's a lot of brake line going all the way to the back of the bike, back to the front of the bike. So you definitely want an air-assisted vacuum. So now we just want to hook up to our bleeder valve here. Hook that on and using our 11mm wrench. Crack open the bleeder. Okay. And remember, with this .4, you don't want to be leaking it all over the place. It probably won't damage your caliper finish, but it might. You never know. If you got nice wheels or something, you don't want to get it on there either. So right now we're going to get the mirror out of the way because we need to take it off anyway. So using our number 6 Allen. Pull it out, and then there's a couple of washers in there. You want to make sure you don't lose them if you're going to reuse your mirrors. So we'll take them out now. So now using the number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, we're going to take the cap off the master cylinder. So now you just want to be ready with a rag to put this on. And with your .4, like, it helps with paper towels or something, because you're going to want to throw any of these rags out. So don't use a good rag that you want to keep. Again, just be careful not to drip it on anything. We have some coming up the edge there. We can quick just wipe it off so it doesn't drip down. So now we just want to turn on the mighty valve. Go over to the other side. So now hook it up to the other side. Our 11mm. Loosen the bleeder. And turn on the mighty vac. So I like to just take the vacuum and clean this out as good as I can. Try and get rid of any stuff that's going to drip when we take this all apart. And I just like to stuff some paper towel in there. And then I'll put the cap back on. Again, with our number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. So now we want to get our exhaust out of the way so we can get to our axle and pull the rear wheel out. So using our 12mm ratcheting wrench, we want to apply pressure on this foot peg here so we can get that nut off the back. You want to just keep pressure to keep that bolt inside from spinning. If the bolt keeps spinning and you can't do it, then you got to take the foot peg off so you can get a 6mm Allen wrench to hold that bolt. And we want to use our 6mm Allen and undo this clamp here. Just watch your swing arm. You don't want to end up scratching that. Might be helpful to tape it up, put a rag or something there. So now we do the same thing on this side. Get our 12mm ratcheting wrench, put pressure on the foot peg. Get our 6mm. And on this side, we also have a bolt through here. It's an extra bracket on this side of the exhaust. So using our 12mm socket, we've got a 12mm wrench. I'm going to pull that bolt out. Now we can pull the muffler off. So I just want to talk about a couple things about jacking up your bike here. We have a lift to work on in here, and I can have the front wheel tied down so I can lift it more towards the front of the motor and have the rear wheel come up without the front wheel coming up. That's going to be real hard to do on the ground, for one. So you can put the jack in the back and just lift up the rear wheel, but now the jack is kind of in your way for the job that we're trying to do. The other thing also, if you're getting too hard with a wrench and you're just on a flat jack, you can actually knock the bike right off the flat jack. So if you don't have a lift to tie the bike down to and you're just working on the ground, it's going to be real difficult to do. So you at least want to, if you're doing it on the ground, you need to have a wheel chock or something to hold your front wheel to help keep it stabilized. Otherwise, you should really just bring it to a shop and let them do this job. So now, when you go to jack up the bike, if you look at the cat, it comes down actually lower than the frame. So if you just come up here, you're going to be teetering on your cat. So we use these blocks to just block it up here. You could use 2x4 or something on each side of the frame if you want to. We get these blocks from Harley Davidson, but you can just make your own out of wood or something. So now we can jack it up. You don't have to go crazy high up in the air. You really just want to be enough to just take the weight off of the wheel so we can get the axle out. So now we want to remove our rear caliper using our 14mm socket. Just need to get these two screws off. Want to undo your ABS sensor from there. Now you just want to hang this up. Get a bungee cord or something. Just find somewhere to hang it on the bike. Now we're ready to remove our rear axle. So with a 27mm socket, we'll take that nut off. So now just push our axle through. This adjuster is going to want to fall out. So hang on to it. You just want to hang on to things and make sure they don't just fall to the ground. Seems to be okay there. Now we can get the chain off the other side. So now we can take off the chain guard, make it easier. Use our 5mm Allen. So now you just want to take your chain off of the sprocket. I'm just going to lay it across here. Throw a little rag on it. Keep it from scratching anything. So now we're going to take the rear wheel out. We want to be holding the brake caliper bracket. Keep it from just falling down. Pull the wheel out of the way, and now you just take the bracket out. we can set it down there. So now you can do one of three things. You could either remove the fender, which will make it easier to just pull the tire out. You can jack up the bike higher so that you can get past all this with the tire, or you could just pull it out and you just got to kind of angle it out. You want to be careful not to scratch anything. So now using our 8mm socket, we want to get this side cover off here. I put some tape on the pipe here because all this stuff we're going to be clearing out of the way, and you might want to rest something on the pipe there so I don't want to scratch it. So I just want to remove this out of the way so it helps us see things a little bit better. Okay, so now we want to remove this plug. You can remove this nut here, which is a 24mm. And this is where it helps to have somebody else on the other side of the bike to hold that pivot shaft from spinning. It's a 19mm on the other side. You can do it by yourself, but it's easier if somebody else is doing it. And this is also where it's important that the bike is really stable and tied down, because this is a lot of torque on here. And if you just try and loosen this up, you might push the bike right off a flat jack. So you need to pop this cap off. There's a little spot in there where you can just get a little screwdriver behind it. And you got your 19mm. Put it on that side. So you put that on that side, and then we need to either be able to do both sides, or you got to get somebody to hold this side for you. Now we loosen. You can take the nut here, and then just got to push it through to the other side. Pull it out. So as per the Triumph manual, you want to put your axle in here now, and that's just going to be to support it when we loosen the other side, because the whole swing arm can drop down. So now, using this special Triumph tool, it goes into these, it's like, just works like a screwdriver. There's two little slots on the side there. So you need to make sure that they're locked in. And then, using our 22mm socket, I'm going to loosen it up. And it just stops there. So using this tool is definitely better. If you're a shop, you want to make this purchase for this tool. Some guys will try and just make a big flat bar stock to fit across there, and can really mangle it up and mess the threads up in there, which you don't want to do. The other thing is, don't ever try and do this with an impact gun to remove it. It doesn't need that much strength to loosen it up. Plus, it's going to stop right there. And if you go and whack it out with an impact gun, you might be doing damage to it. So now, before we remove the swing arm, we're going to take the shocks off. You could really pull the swing arm back and leave the shocks on, but it's all going to be in your way when you're trying to do this. And for 4 screws, you might as well get it out of your way. So using your 8mm Allen, take the screws off. Before we remove this shock, we just want to get this cover off of here, and we're going to have to move some of these hoses around and make things a little clearer for us to pull the swing arm out. So using our 5mm Allen, take this screw out, and then this one here. Next, we want to remove our charcoal canister. You got these 2 little screws there, which is a 3mm Allen. I don't use power tools on these because they're just going into plastic, and they're very small. pull it off these two hoses here. So now we just want to make sure nothing else is attached to our swing arm. It's going to stop us from pulling it out here. That looks like it. Take these two off of this side. So now we can remove this shock. We just want to support the swing arm so it doesn't just slam down. And we can pull the pivot shaft out. Tilt up. Start turning it out. So now using our T20, I'm going to take these 3 screws out just to loosen this up so when we're taking the brake line out, it's just frees it up a little bit. You don't have to pull it all the way off. So now this can just move around because our brake line runs through here and between that. Okay, so the line we're going to be removing is this one right here. I don't know if this is a rule for every one of them, but from what I've noticed so far, is it's always the one with the blue dot on top of the banjo bolt. But it's the outboard one here on the left side. Using our 12mm socket, I'm going to crack this loose. Just remember, you're going to have brake fluid in here, so you want to be careful not to get it all over the place. Be useful to have a rag. Start soaking it up. Okay. Now, if you take the bag that the washers come in from the kit, just take your washers out, get some paper towel, stuff it in the bag. Put that around there. And if you just get a small cable tie, now you don't have to worry about getting brake fluid all over the place. Any of that drips out into the bag should hopefully get soaked up by the paper towel and doesn't leak past the cable tie there. So now we want to remove this plastic piece here that's holding the brake line to the top there. So using our T30 Torx bit, take these 2 screws out. Just pull that down, let it drop. Pull this one out from underneath. And now we'll go disconnect it from the master cylinder and we can pull it through and start working our way out of here. So now we're going to remove this banjo bolt here. It's a 14mm. And you just want to keep a rag under there. Even though we sucked all the fluid out, there'll still be some residual in there. So you want to use a lot of caution not to get it all over the bike. Okay, so now to seal this off while we're still working on the bike, you get a piece of rubber hose that you can fit nice and tightly over the banjo bolt. And sometimes you gotta screw it onto it, which means it's definitely tight enough if you have to do that. Once we get some threads, we can start threading it in. So this is just standard 3/8 oil line. Just cut a little piece about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch deep and put it on there. You don't have to go crazy tight, just tight enough that it keeps the fluid from coming out. So now again, we'll do our little trick using the other bag from the other washers. Put the paper towel inside the bag. Not that there's going to be a lot of fluid in there, but you just don't even want to get little drops anywhere. If you do, water right away, lots of it, especially if it's on paint, will stop the .4 from being corrosive like that. So now we want to start pulling the brake line through. Okay. All right, so now we got to pull this line through here. The line here is a hard line, so it's not easy to pull. It's not flexible like it was over there. So this is going to get destroyed when you pull it through. It's got to get bent up and everything. You wouldn't want to try and reuse it and take a chance on that. You want to pull it out of these clips here and start pulling through. The advantage to our kit now is when it comes up here, it's all flexible line, and then it stops up here and then has a second line going that way. And if you ever change your bars again, you would only have to disconnect it from here and put whatever brake line is necessary for the bars that you decide to use. So now we just start pulling. Okay. Okay. So got that part out of there. Now we have to leave this part out from the bottom. It's clipped in over here, so we want to just kind of pry it out of there. So you're probably thinking right now, why don't they just cut it out? Well, we could cut it out, and the fact of the matter is, if I was doing this, I probably would just cut it out since you can't reuse it. But where you got to be careful is if you cut something and you cut something else that you shouldn't have cut is not a good thing. This is hard steel, so you've got to have the right cutters to do it. I don't know what kind of cutters you got at home, so we're trying to show you how to do it without having to cut it. But you definitely could just cut it off right here, get this thing gone, and then pull that out that way. But you're also going to make a very sharp edge on the brake line, and you're going to have fluid wanting to leak out of there. So you got to be cautious of that. With that sharp line, you're probably going to scratch up your frame a bit as you pull it through. So all things to think of. But yeah, you definitely could cut it out if that's what you want to do. All right, so now it helps if you hold the brake line down here and just kind of straighten it out a little bit as you go. And you can see it just starts straightening out and comes right out the top there. Straighten it out on the bottom, bring it out through the bottom. And sometimes this goes a lot easier than other times. So now we want to get the brake line, the lower brake line for the kit, which you know it's going to be the one that has this fitting on it. I'm going to take that fitting off just so we can fit it through. The banjo part stays at the bottom. We're going to come up through here just like the old brake line went. And bring it up there. And bring it up into here. Now from this point, I just want to route it so everything runs where it needs to be down here. So just in case, for some of you that might not know, when I'm referring to the banjo, this is the banjo. It's called a banjo because it looks like a banjo. This is an AN fitting right here, an AN3. So just in case you were wondering. So one thing you need to do is make sure that this old banjo washer is not in there. Take that out. Now in the kit, you've got two washers, one real thick one and a thinner one. The real thick one goes on the bottom, and that assures that we have the proper clearance for our banjo as it goes to the back and it doesn't end up cocked because it's hitting the ABS unit. Same thing on the banjo bolt. Make sure you get rid of that old washer and put our new washer on. And you can tell if it's the old one because the old one's silver. The new ones are copper. So now we can put our banjo in. Put the bolt in. And again, if you put that thick washer on top and the thin one on the bottom, it's going to make that kick over like that. It'll never seal up and might even break something. So using our 12mm socket, we're going to tighten that up. So now we're going to final tighten with our 12mm this banjo bolt to 25 Newton meters. And now we can final route our line. I'm going to pop it in where the old line used to be. And now we can put all this stuff back together and then move back to the front of the bike and do the bars. Gonna get our swing arm back in. Make sure before you go in there that these spacers hadn't fallen out. Double check both sides. Come in. Okay. From the right side, we can put our pivot shaft into our swing arm. And if you're having a problem at this point and it just doesn't want to go no matter what you do, you may need to get somebody on the other side to get in there with a screwdriver and kind of align the inner spacer until you can push the shaft through. And all we're trying to do here is get everything aligned so when we put our adjuster sleeve tight, it all lines up and the inner spacer is where it needs to be. So again, with this tool, no power tools. When we final tighten this, it's only going to go down to 6 Newton meters. It's not any kind of crazy torque on there. It's only keeping things in alignment. So now we can get our pivot shaft out of there and run it back through this way properly and torque down the nut on the other side. So now we can pull this shaft out and the swing arm stays where it should. So now we put our pivot shaft through. Put our washer on. Put a new nut per the Triumph manual. Okay, we're gonna put our 19mm socket on that side with our 24mm. Gonna tighten this up. And then we're gonna final torque it to 110 Newton meters. Just double check, make sure everything's moving nice, nothing's shaking. It's good. So now we're going to put the canister back on. These two hoses here, they go on these two right here. There's a smaller one and a larger one, a smaller one and a larger one. So when you're putting this back in, you'll see this little rubber bushing back here. This middle one right here, nub sticking out, is going to go into that. And just slide right up. So now we just want to line up these holes with the screw holes using our 3mm Allen. Put the screws back in. Don't make that one tight yet until you get the other screw in. Again, just hand tight. We're only going into plastic here. No power tools. Okay, so now I want to stick this rubber up back on there. We can get this screwed back on and get this cover back on. With our T20, need to push these into alignment there. Just get it started. It's only plastic. Just hand tight. So now I'm going to put this cover back on. Put a little blue Loctite on these screws. With our 8mm socket. So we're going to put our rear shocks on. With our 8mm Allen. Put some blue Loctite. .28 Newton meters. Do the same on the other side. I'm going to put the little plastic cover back on. So now we're going to put this cover back on over the coolant bottle. And make sure you have your little top hat spacers on the screws or in the cover. They might still be stuck there. With our 5mm Allen. Put those screws back in. One thing you want to make sure is that your top hat spacer is going all the way through both of these. If you sandwich this part in between the frame and the top hat spacer, you're just going to end up cracking that off. So you need to make sure it's sitting on there like that. I know I'm always saying no impact or power tools on plastic, But this isn't screwing into plastic, it's screwing into metal. And the top hat spacer stops it from squishing the plastic to no end. Some of those other ones, if you just kept going, you would just tighten it down until the plastic just broke apart. This one, the top hat spacer is going to bottom out against the metal frame and stop. So you can't squeeze the plastic too much. That's why we have the top hat spacers in there. All right, one thing, make sure your chain is looped up over your swing arm. And also make sure that your sprocket is on the right side. You don't want to get it all the way in there and realize you're trying to put your chain on your rotor. So now we can slide her in. You want to make sure that your brake caliper bracket is in place. Not that it's impossible to get it in after you put the wheel up, but it's just a lot easier to get it in here first and not have to worry about it. It just mounts into that slot there and just hangs in place while you're putting the wheel in. And as you can see, I went and made it higher to make it easier to get in there. So now I just have to lower it back down. All right, now make sure that your bracket and your wheel are lined up in the same spot and you can get through your swing arm there. Make sure that your axle adjuster block is in place. And we may have to raise or lower the lift a little bit to make this go in perfect. Find out. Yep, we got it, first try. We put our adjuster block back in. Make sure that the lip is facing out. Get our washer on. So at this point, if you need to readjust your chain, refer to your owner's manual for the correct way to do it. With your 27 millimeter socket, you want to torque this down to 110 Newton meters. So now we can reinstall the chain guard. Using our 5 millimeter Allen. It's good and snug. It's not a heavy piece, just plastic. So now we can install our caliper. And make sure that your disc goes in between the pads. You don't end up with both pads on one side. Our 14 millimeter socket. Snug those down. And we're going to torque them down to 40 Newton meters. So now we want to hook up our cable and the brake line back to the swing arm. Make sure it's secure. Put our side cover back on. So to make this easier to put on, we're going to loosen up this heat shield by loosening this bolt here with our 5 millimeter Allen, which will now allow us to pull that away a little bit, and it'll be easier to get in. If we have to, we may even just take this all the way off. All right. And we can pull it away even more. How's that? Now we can just slide right in there. So we're going to start by putting our passenger foot peg back on. You want to make sure you get this little alignment nub in there that has to go into this little hole right here. That'll keep it from spinning. And now, with our 12mm ratchet wrench, we want to put pressure downward on the foot peg, keep the bolt from spinning, and keep an eye on that nub, make sure it's going into the hole and not getting squished. Okay. So now we can tighten this exhaust clamp with our 6mm Allen. And then we're going to put the heat shield clamp back on. And using our 5mm Allen, we'll do the same on the other side. All right, now we're going to put this one on. You got to remember you have this extra piece here. This spacer goes in with the wide part towards the bike. And then the bolt goes in that way. This one was a lot easier to get out, so we don't need to loosen the heat shield. Now, I'm going to put that bolt in. So I'm going to start by putting the passenger peg in. Again, make sure that that nub is in a line with the hole on the frame. Get your nut on the back. Put pressure on the peg, keep the bolt from spinning. Keep an eye on that nub that it's going into the alignment hole. You want to get that bolt through on the bottom and put the nut in the back. And then with a 12mm wrench on the nut and 12mm socket on the bolt, tighten it up. And with our 6mm Allen, we can tighten up the exhaust clamp. So we're going to start now for the handlebar replacement. We're going to take off these controls using our 5mm Allen. Take the clamp off. And then with our T20 Torx bit, we'll take the screws out of here. Then we'll do the same over here using our 5mm. We'll take this clamp off. And with our T20, take the switch housing off. So to take the handlebar off, and to get these controls off, you got to slide the handlebar out of the controls. So we're going to take this bar end off here using our 4mm Allen. So now we're going to take the clamp off using our 6mm Allen. You want to support the bar here because as it loosens up, it may just drop down on you. Take this clamp completely off. And you can see the knurl helped support it a bit there. Didn't want to just fall right out, so that's good. Slide that out. So now we want to replace our risers. And to get the old ones off, you want to screw the cap back on, which will keep them fixed. So then when we take the nuts off of here, they won't just spin around on us. Get your 14mm socket. So you see this washer right here? That's attached to a wire guide that keeps all our cables and everything in order where they need to be. So this won't fall off, but we need to make sure we put it back in its proper place when we put the new risers on. So now we'll do this side. Now, if you're just changing out risers and you don't have your tank off, you're going to want to do this on the ground so you can turn the wheel back and forth, because you won't be able to fit a ratchet in here. If you have a power tool, it'll make it a little easier because you don't have to swing back and forth, but it's still, just to break it is hard. So you either want to have the tank off or do it on the ground so you can move it. So under your risers here, there's 2 washers. We're going to take them off. We're not going to use them. One trick you want to do is if you drape your cables over this way, it takes the weight off and will help you line up your wire guide and washer down here. You got a spacer in the kit. You have to use the spacer with this handlebar kit, otherwise your bars are going to hit your tank. Make sure you leave the washer out. If you use the washer, it's going to move around too much, doesn't get a good enough clamp load. Use the longest bolt in the kit, 1 spacer. Get our washer on there. I'm just going to start 1 nut. And we'll do the other one. Okay, now we're going to put the spacer on. Longest bolt. And this is our washer down here. Just want to make sure that the bolt goes through it. Get the nut on there. If you spin the riser, it'll spin the bolt for you. Get you started. Okay. So on your risers, you'll notice there's 2 little dots on there. They don't mean anything other than what size these are for. Doesn't matter whether they go this way, that way. For good practice, I always like to make sure they're the same way, but it really doesn't matter. You got the same thing on the cap. I always like to make sure the dots are on the cap or on the same spot on the riser, but it really doesn't matter. You want to slide the bar through the throttle sensor. Put your cap on. Just snug enough to hold it. Get the bars centered up. So I took this off of the stock bar. I used air to blow it off. You could use rubbing alcohol, hand sanitizer. Some people even use spray paint on these to just get them to slide up there, or you could use air, which will make it expand. There you go. So when you're looking to get center on here, basically if you can stick your finger in there and feel the difference, you're going to be super close. You may never get it 100% perfect, but as long as it looks good and feels good, you're okay. So when you put these caps on, you don't want to tighten them down just yet. You just want them snug enough that the bar can still move a little bit, because as we tighten down these nuts, we need them to move into place as they need to be. Plus, we're going to have to loosen them up again anyway to drill the bar. So now using our 17mm socket, and we want to torque these down to 38 Newton meters. So now you need to decide what angle do you want to have your levers at. You know, you don't want them to end up straight out like that, and then your wrists are bent up as you're trying to ride. You kind of just want to find them in a comfortable position. So to do that, it would be good to just put the clamp on over here. So you don't want to make this clamp too tight, because there's an alignment dowel back there, and you don't want to be breaking anything. This is what we're trying to work towards right now, is actually drilling a hole for the alignment dowel. The other thing you need to know is if you're going to run bar ends, whether or not you're going to run adapters, or can you fit that bar end on the end here and still be able to fit your controls. You only have so much room that you can move your controls up. So you got to kind of figure that one out. We use adapters. That's what we're going to use here. That will extend the bar out. So we want our control to be right at the end here. You don't want to be too tight against the adapter, because then your throttle won't want to return properly. So we need to leave a little bit of a space here. So now that I got this where I want it, I'm going to make a mark right here off of this clamp, because this clamp is sitting flush on there. And what we have to do now is take this off, and we're going to put a piece of tape on there and make a mark where we need to drill our hole. So use our 5mm and get these screws out. So we just need to make a mark right about here, so we don't need to cover the whole thing. So we're just going to put a piece of tape right there. So now what we want to do is remove these two screws here with a T20 Torx bit. Just going to put those screws to the side. At this point, you can pull the lever, the throttle away. So now, I just want to take some marker, get a lot of it on that alignment dowel there. And now we can put our clamp back on. We'll put it up where we wanted it to be. Now we want to tighten this up to try and make a mark on the tape right where our alignment dowel is. Don't make it too tight, because you end up stripping out these threads or breaking a clamp or something. So just want to do it enough to make a mark there. It may make a black mark, it may make a tear in the tape. Either way, a mark is a mark. And there's our mark. That's where we need to drill. So now we got these set where we like them. I want to take a piece of tape, put it right here. I'm just going to mark it right where the clamp and the cap meet. So now I can be able to put it right back to that spot. But right now we want to loosen this and we're going to turn them upright, which will help us get the drill in there to drill the handlebar. Loosen these up so that we can turn the bar. So now you just want to be able to turn it so we can get our drill straight in to our mark there now, rather than trying to go up on an angle. And just tighten down one clamp just to hold it in place. So now to make this drilling process even easier, company LSL has come out with this guide for drilling. It's got a little drill bushing there. They got one for 1-inch bars and one for 7/8-inch bars. So now I can just line that up with my mark through the hole there, screw it together, and make sure you have it lined up correctly. Try your best to keep the gap even on both sides, and that'll make your drill go straight into the bar. So now we're going to drill this hole with a number 9 drill bit or 3/16. And then you want to open it up with a number 7. So now you want to take the jig off. So now we're going to open the hole a 1/4 inch. And that's a nice fit right there. So now we can bolt our throttle sensor back in place. We don't want to forget to put our throttle back in too. Throttle tube. Helps if you got a little magnet. Get that in there. And using our T20. Snug it up until we get the other one in. So now, get that alignment dowel in. And get our clamp on. And just snug that up so it's not sliding around. So now we can put our switch housing back on. Just want to make sure that that's not getting wedged in between there. That's for your heated grips. Put our screw in there with our T20. And then that one short screw comes in on the bottom. So now you just want to roll it back, get your mark lined up again. Probably going to end up moving it again from there, but this gets you really close to where you wanted it. Once you get everything all back together, you ride it around a little bit, you might want to change it again. So now we're going to put this side on, May have to twist this around a little bit to get it all to line up. We'll get our clamp on. So everything looks good, so I'm going to tighten it all down now. My 5mm Allen. So now we can put these screws in with our T20. And just because you had to drill that alignment hole doesn't mean you can't adjust these a little bit. If you get out on the road and you feel you want to change them a little, you can open that hole up a little bit more. You know, as long as it's not too much, just to get it to angle a little bit differently. But you really want to be as close as you can get right from the start. Okay, so now we're going to torque down the handlebar clamps. And what I like to do is just to make sure that I'm getting both sides even. So I have this little spacer is set at 55 thousandths of an inch, I think. That gets me really close. So I'll tighten down the front till it meets that. And then I can loosen it up just enough to pull that out. The same thing on this side. May have to loosen the other side to get it there. Now we can tighten these back ones up. Now we'll torque it down to 10 Newton meters. Since we set the ones in the front, we're going to tighten the ones in the back. Now we'll tighten the forward ones. And just double check these one time, and that's it. Okay. All right, so now we want to hook our AN fittings together here and join up our two brake lines. This here is a 7/16. You can get away with an 11mm, but it really is a 7/16. And if you got a flare nut wrench, that's real nice to get a grip on there. And again, this is a 5/8. You can get away with a 16mm, but the 5/8 seems to fit a little tighter, so it's nicer. Put that on there. And now we can screw that one on there. And that's where we got a problem on this. We can't fit a flare wrench over there, so we got to use this end. Not a problem really though. Flip this over to that side. Okay. Now we're going to guide it through here, same as it was with the stock line. Okay. And that can pop right in there. We're going to guide it up to the front here. Now we want to send it up through the wire guide here, just like the stock one was. And we're going to wait to try and tighten that until we have it into our banjo bolt, and that'll hold it secure, and then we can tighten that. So you want to keep a little rag under there, because chances are we're going to get some brake fluid out of here. Using our 14mm socket, and pull out that banjo. Actually pretty good with the brake fluid, so that's good. Whatever you do, don't squeeze that handle, because you will shoot some brake fluid out. So now we just need to take the piece of rubber off. So when you're putting this on, you want to make sure you got your bend going inwards. We want to put our washer on our bolt. Put the bolt through. Put the other washer on. Start the bolt in. Sorry, 14mm. Tighten that up. So now we want to torque this down to 25 Newton meters. So now we can tighten this again with our 7/16. It's going to be a little tighter of a fit than the 11mm, but you can get away with 11mm. And if you got a flare wrench, even though you can't fit it over here, it's still a nice fat wrench, so it really spans the whole thing. So now we want to take this cap off using our number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. And pull our paper towel out. Throw that out. So now we're going to fill this with .4. Do not use .5. I'm going to fill it as high as I can go. It's kind of hard with the angle of this, so you really want to keep an eye as you're bleeding it that you're not going empty on it. And ultimately the best way to do it would be to get it back on the ground and set this bar to where it's nice and level, and then start bleeding it. So now we're going to hook up our brake bleeder, and this isn't as big a deal when you're actually evacuating the system, but when you are actually bleeding the system, you always want to run this upwards so that when you're bleeding it out, it stays full of fluid and air always goes up. So you don't actually have to rush to close that, because the air can't go back down and into there. So you'll always stay with fluid. So that's it. You want to make sure that you don't ever run out of fluid in here, because then you're just sucking air into the system. So this is best off being a two-man job. One person always making sure this is full, and the other person keeping an eye on whether or not we have fluid coming out the other end yet. So now I know that I got solid fluid here because I have no more air bubbles. This is why I say to run this up. You know, the air is all over here. It's kind of hard to see, but this is all solid fluid right now. There was bubbles coming up and then they stopped. So now using my 11mm, I'm going to tighten that up. And then we'll move over to the other caliper and do the same thing. You want to turn that on as you take it off, otherwise you're going to have a bunch of .4 come spilling out. So now I'm going to squeeze the brake handle a little bit and look for any bubbles. And it's all nice and solid. So now I can take my 11mm, tighten this up. Turn this on. So right now, we're not going to get this to pump up because we probably have air trapped somewhere in there because of the way this is sitting. Once we get it on the ground, we can get this thing level, and whatever air is left in the top, we'll be able to get to come out of here, and you'll see a bunch of air bubbles blow out of that one small hole over there. So for now, I want to put the cap back on. We're going to get the tank on, everything back together, then we're going to roll it on the floor and finish the brakes on the floor. So you want to put this on, make sure your rubber and everything is in place with the plastic. It all looks uniform. Put the cap on. A few screws in there. With the number 2 Phillips. Tighten it down. Tighten down both sides evenly. Don't crank down on one side and then the other. So now we want to slide the plastic guide back up behind all these wires and the brake line and clutch cable. Make sure everything looks neat and organized. Your brake line should be falling right into this divot here, and all your wires into there. Your clutch cable is going to be on the outside when you slide this guide up. All your wires, again, into the bigger slot. Right there. And your brake line should be coming right through that. Just like that. Get this top one in. Now we'll just see that the bottom's in line. Okay. Our T30. Tighten that up. Now we're ready to put the tank back on. Got this one little clip right here. Make sure that's clipped to your clutch cable right there. There you go. So we got these set up really close where we think they should end up being. But once we get the tank on, we're going to go out for a ride and really take some notes on what we feel about it, you know, what needs to be changed. You know, with any luck, we'll get them perfect, but I've never seen that happen. You always come back and want to adjust them a little bit, either move these down or up a little bit or turn the bar a little bit. So, you know, you're going to end up readjusting it. Not a big deal. That's what you need to do. All right, so we're going to put the tank on now. These 2 nubs right here with the rubber on them, you got 2 grooves inside the tank that go around, you know, fork around this, and that's what holds the tank on. Okay. So that's all in line. And it's very easy to try and put it on and end up being on top of those and sliding your tank all the way forward and hitting your forks or something. So you want to be very careful. If you're not familiar with doing it too often, then maybe you want to put some towel up here or something to protect the tank. So now I'm going to put my block of wood back in. We're going to hook up this vacuum line. So the vacuum line goes into a little clip here from this direction. Put it in there. Fold the clip up just enough to hold that in there. And then on this one, it goes in this way. So push that in. And again, just push it up just enough to keep it from falling out. And then connect the hose right up here. There's a little spigot there that you want to get on. Now we can go to the other side of the tank, plug in the electronics, and then hook up the fuel line. So now we're going to plug these in. You got your 2-place and your 2-place, and your 4 and your 4. So that's, you can't really mix them up. I think that would be impossible. Get them both in, and then I'm going to push them up towards the top there. We don't want to hook them up into their things until we get this in, and then we can pull them back down and put them on their little locator pieces. There you go. So these two little clips sticking off here, that's what these plugs hook onto. So that's what we're trying to get to. They just slide right onto them. And it's almost like if you just get close, they go right on. Okay. So now we're ready to hook up the fuel line. Remember, you want to take this locking piece, push it back, so that it's unlocked. And then we need to push it down until you hear that click. And then you push that forward. That's what locks it on. Make sure it doesn't fall off. Now we're ready to lower the tank down. So now we can take our block out. And you notice I didn't use my wood block. I ended up putting this in there to lift the tank a little higher. Really helped us out getting that stuff hooked up in there. So now we can run our bolt through here, put the nut on. So like 10mm wrench or 8mm socket. Tighten that up. So now we want to install our battery. Take this screw out with our number 3 Phillips. Connect our negative terminal. Now we can put our seat on. So now we're just going to get this thing down on the ground so we can finish off the brakes and we can check any clearances, you know, side to side, make sure nothing's going to hit the tank, make sure that the cables are all moving freely, and then we'll call it a day. So now that the bike is back on the ground and we can set this so that it's level, we're going to take this cap back off and finish the brake bleed here. And the other thing too with these ABS brakes, you may just have to bring it to the dealer so they can do a full ABS bleed, which will activate the ABS unit and get any air out of the unit if there is any. Well, I don't have any bubbles coming out of there. So now we can try and run again from the calipers and see if we can't get any more. So we're going to top this off. Probably going to have to get another bottle. So we're pretty happy with the brakes right now, so we're going to put the cap on here. But as happy as I am with these brakes, we're still going to advise the dealer to do an ABS bleed procedure on it, just to make absolute sure. And if you feel at all like your brakes just could be a little bit better, then we really strongly advise that you go to the dealer and have them do that. I mean, that feels really good, but there could be the slightest amount of air in there, and the only way to get it out is to activate the ABS unit and open it up so that the air can flow out. So that being said, there you go. That's the cafe bar install.